In this video, we're going to have a look at the prologue in detail and see if we can figure out ways to use it in any essay that we ever write, ever again, on Romeo and Juliet. The first question I want to ask you about the prologue is, why on earth does Shakespeare provide it to us? Why does Shakespeare open the play with a prologue in which he reveals the entire plot of the play, including the dramatic ending of the death of the two lovers? Why would you open by telling us what's going to happen in the end of the play? Possible reasons behind the prologue and the plot spoiler. First of all, it adds a sense of dramatic irony. Dramatic irony is the term that we use to describe the situation whereby an audience, the viewer or the reader, already knows what's going to happen before the characters do. So you already know the fate of the characters, and that in itself makes for a great watching or reading experience, because every step of the way you're watching that character's journey unfold and you know where it ends. And that's when you get those moments where they make a decision and you're almost shouting at the screen, no, don't do it. You're almost standing up in the theatre or shouting at the book in front of you. So that's dramatic irony. By telling us that these two lovers are going to die by the end of this play, we are left in a position where all we can do is watch it unfold. And it creates that strong sense of tragic mood and the kind of bittersweet tone of the entire play. Because even when there are positive moments, even when there are fantastic love scenes of absolute teenage joy, we have in the back of our minds that bitter knowledge that they're going to die. Also, it serves to emphasize the power of fate for the viewer. So we see every turn of the page, every new card that's laid down, every roll of the dice, we see, no matter what Romeo and Juliet try and do, fate steps in somehow to get in their way and result in their ultimate downfall. And that also allows us to witness the anagnorisis, which anagnorisis is this idea of a character coming to some sort of realization about themselves or about life. It's some big moment of self-realization. And because we already know what's going to happen to them, we get to see the characters make decisions and have changes in their attitudes. And Romeo and Juliet both have these kind of epiphanies, these epiphanic moments where they suddenly realize, this is the situation. And then they either, in one case, as we'll discuss, they transform almost their personality to become someone new, or they accept their fate with a sense of almost resignation in a way. But as we'll come to, as well as that resignation to their fate, there is that reclaiming of power that they get just by way of the method in which they die. The prologue introduces us to the key themes of the play itself. So just by listening to the prologue, we know exactly what this play is about and what are the real issues that drive the plot. So your first task is to look at the opening 8 lines of the prologue and find words or phrases that make us think about those key themes. So the key themes I've chosen are fate, conflict, family, love, and then youth, pride, masculinity, and violence. So if you have a look at the opening 8 lines of the prologue over here, you should be able to find words or phrases that link to those key themes. The prologue begins, 2 households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona where we lay our scene. From ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. From forth the fatal loins of these 2 foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose misadventured piteous overthrows do with their death bury their parents' strife. you might have found different things and different links to me, but if we start with fate. So fate in particular is really important in this play because of the fact that we're told from the very beginning that these two children, these two teenagers, are star-crossed lovers. Now, by star-crossed, it means kind of it's written in the stars that they can't be together. And the idea of being star-crossed, if you think about stars being on an orbit, it's almost like Juliet is on one orbit, going around in a circle, and Romeo is on a different orbit. And they might cross every now and again, but they're not destined to be on the same orbit together. The stars have decided that they cannot be together. So we know from the beginning that they are fated to be apart. They are not meant to be together. You could argue that fatal loins, so fatal literally meaning deadly, but you could argue that this idea of them being fatal, so linked to the idea of the loins, the bodies that have given birth to these children were fatal. So birth, it's almost oxymoronic, the idea of birth being fatal in the end, but also that they are fated towards a certain journey in life and a certain ending. And then the idea of the misadventured, piteous overthrows. So misadventure, if you think about sometimes you'll hear the line death by misadventure, which means that the person didn't intend to die. They didn't intend to cause their own death. But again, it's like the stars weren't aligned. Things went wrong that perhaps shouldn't have gone wrong. Mistakes were made. Odd things happened. Misadventure. So these two are written, they're destined to be to end in tragedy. And they're literally written to end in tragedy because Shakespeare wrote them that way. Conflict, never forget that the opening word, the very first word of the entire play is two. And when you think about the concept of two, if you look on line 6 there, you've got the idea of a pair. And you need to have a think about the difference. What's the difference between two as opposed to a pair? Because technically they're kind of the same thing, but they're not when you think about it. So the idea of having two emphasizes that idea of conflict immediately. And then when you follow it with this word households, which is linked into the idea of family, it's linked into the idea of wealth, into the idea of pride. You've got two households, straight away you've got conflict, and then we're told both alike in dignity. So they're both as proud and as successful as each other. That in itself, in an opening line, you know for a fact you're going to have conflict. Even if it be mild, even if it be subtle, it might be passive-aggressive somehow, but there is going to be conflict if you've got two households who are very similar to each other. But then we're told that there is an ancient grudge. So that word grudge is key. If you've got a grudge, it doesn't always mean, does it necessarily, that there's an actual specific disagreement. A grudge can just be something that carries on for generations and nobody really knows what caused it in the first place. So a grudge is a very specific word that you could focus in on. And the fact that it's ancient, it's got no date on it as such, it's just ancient, it's been going on for ages. Nobody knows quite why, but the Montagues don't like the Capulets and the Capulets don't like the Montagues. The idea, going back to conflict, of a new mutiny. So mutiny again implies some sort of rebellion. There's clearly, there are rules in place here that aren't being followed. A mutiny involves some kind of refusal to follow the rules. A new mutiny. And they're named as foes. They're called foes. They are enemies. They argue. They're on opposite sides. You've also got this hint of an idea about linking into the violence and the masculinity really that drives this conflict, because what you'll notice as you go through the play is it's not the women really that are causing the conflict or perpetuating it. It's not the women that are continuing it as such, it's the men. And it's the men's sense of pride, it's the men's sense of masculinity, it's particularly their sense of what it means to be a man on behalf of their household, on behalf of their family. That's what causes half the problems in this play. So that line where civil blood makes civil hands unclean, it's this idea that this is normal citizens at all levels of society. You've got from the lords right down to the servants fighting. They're supposed to be civil, they're supposed to be citizens of each of these families, but all that they're doing is shedding blood and shedding the blood of the other family as well. Then we've got the idea of violence. So never forget when you're reading this play that these are two children, effectively. These are two young people who choose, they actively choose, because they have no other option really, to take their own lives in order to show their love for one another, and because they would rather be together in death than they would be apart in life. That's the most important thing to keep in mind about this play. However over the top you think that is, however unrealistic you think that is, that's what happened. Two people fell in love, could not be without each other, and made the decision to take their lives rather than live without each other. That's really important. The level of violence towards their own selves, is astonishing, and that's what makes this a tragedy, that they had to go that far, that they had no other option in their mind than to make that decision and die in each other's arms. So here's where it gets really cool. If you are given an essay question that is about pride in the play Romeo and Juliet, and that might also be linked to honour, it could be linked to family in a sense, but if you get something that links into this idea of being proud and needing to maintain honour, you can begin with the prologue. So something along the lines of Shakespeare introduces us immediately to the idea of pride being an emotion or something that's going to drive the plot of this play in the prologue. So Shakespeare introduces the importance of pride in the prologue. He does this when he uses the phrase, he tells us that the households are both alike in dignity, or you could talk about the ancient grudge. So you can talk about straight away from the prologue, you've already got two quotes that link into this idea of pride. Now what you need to do is think about other moments in the play and pause before you look at the next slide where the answers are. Think about other moments in the play where pride is shown and use these quotes here to prompt those other moments to spring into your mind. So think about moments when people are shown to be alike in terms of their level of pride, when they're shown to be acting based on that pride, when they're shown to be referring to or acting in a way that references this ancient grudge. When are the other moments in the play where this sense of pride and this ancient grudge come to the fore? Try and think of 3 other moments from the play, and then try and think of a quote to go with each one of those moments. So there are lots of moments in which pride is shown to be perhaps a flawed or dangerous emotion, and there are lots of moments whereby the ancient grudge comes to the fore as being an issue. So a great place to start would be Act 1, Scene 1, following the big fight in the marketplace between the servants. Who shouts to his wife, "Give me my longsword"? So that's question number 1. Who says to his wife, "Give me my longsword"? In other words, get me my sword. I'm getting out there. I'm going to take part in this fight. I'm not having this. And then who says to her husband, "Thou shalt not stir a foot to seek a foe"? So this is on the other side. You've got one of the lords shouting, "Give me my sword." The other one of the lords is saying, "I'm off out there too. I'm going to fight." And his wife is saying to him, "No, you're not going anywhere." Then later on in Act 3, Scene 1, you've obviously got the famous line, "A plague on both your houses," from Mercutio. And before he dies, as a result of this ancient grudge, it's this ancient grudge that ironically leads to the death of somebody who's in neither of the houses. Then you also have this constant sense of pride and maintaining your face, your kind of reputation in front of others. So you've got one of the servants, that's another question. Who is it that says, a dog of the house of Montague moves me? So in other words, if I see anyone from the house of Montague, I'll have him. And then you've got the inimitable Mercutio, who says, by my heel I care not. This is when Benvolio and the others are trying to persuade Mercutio to retire, like, let's go in for the day, it's hot outside. The Capulets are abroad, they're about in town. Also, here comes Tybalt. By my heel I care not, says Mercutio. Now he either digs his heel in there, or maybe, as in the Baz Luhrmann version, he puts his feet up on the table as if to say, I'm not going anywhere, I don't care. And then, again, this brilliant line that's useful for pretty much any essay as well, when Mercutio can't quite understand Romeo's actions in Act 3, Scene 1, when he refuses to fight Tybalt and he kind of pushes them to one side, says, oh, calm, dishonourable, vile submission, what are you playing at? Why are you not fighting back against this man? So these are other moments that should and will jump into your mind when you're thinking about these ideas from the prologue. So the prologue is the skeleton that then allows you to build around your own ideas. So what you'll notice is, as well as being able to write an essay about pride, using those 2 quotes from the prologue and other quotes from the rest of the play, when you look at what you've got in front of you on the page, you will be able to use those quotes in an essay that is about conflict, or an essay about masculinity, or an essay about violence. All of the quotes on this page would work for essays about those things. So this is what will happen as you do your revision. You'll start by planning out an essay for one particular question, but you'll find that those quotes would apply to multiple questions. So here's just a little quiz overview. If you want to start planning an essay on fate, you've got the quotes from the prologue, and here are some other quotes that you could use, but there are missing words. So your job is to fill in the missing words, and then you need to identify who said it, when, why, and what it means about fate and its importance in the play. So here's the same again with some quotes about love from the play. You could argue that the prologue itself is all about love, since it outlines what happens when people are in love, to the degree that love seems to be the most powerful emotion and wins out over everything, potentially, apart from fate. So once again, if you look at these quotes, fill in the missing word and then identify who said it, when they said it, why they said it, and what it means, what it tells us about love. So now we've got a list of themes linked to the play. We've got those themes identified in quote form in the prologue. We've identified quotations from the rest of the play that link to those themes. A final really useful revision technique or tool that you might want to try is write a paragraph or speak for 1 minute and try and sum up what Shakespeare is trying to tell us about life. What does he want us to understand about these big emotions or these big concepts? So it's almost like a bus stop answer that you would have at the start of your essay. So for example, if I wanted to try and explain what I think Shakespeare wanted us to know, what did he want us to understand about youth in this play? I would say something like this. In this play, it could be argued that the drama unfolds largely because the protagonists and antagonists are young. The youthful passions of Romeo, Tybalt, Mercutio, and to a degree Juliet, drive the action and ultimately deliver the tragedy of the story. Shakespeare might have wanted the audience to both feel the intensity of these passions and understand that in the right conditions they can result in the ultimate tragedy. He might be offering a criticism of adults and elders too, as shown in the prologue when he declares that the heads of the families finally bury their strife at the same time as they bury their children. So I wrote that without sort of pausing too much. That was my initial thought, what I can then do, if you do the same thing, write down your initial thoughts or speak them aloud and record yourself, you can then use this as a sort of essay skeleton, a bit like we've done earlier, and you could build on this. So for this particular paragraph, I might pick out moments where Romeo, Tybalt and Mercutio show their youthful passions. When do they show themselves to be acting perhaps a little bit according to their age? What about Juliet, and why have I said to a degree? Why is she not in the same grouping as the others? I might then look at the ultimate tragedy at the end. I could then focus on this bit at the end of my paragraph where I've talked about adults and what he might be trying to suggest about those, as opposed to the youth in Verona. So hopefully that was helpful, and hopefully you now know and feel confident in using the prologue almost like a springboard to approach essays on Romeo and Juliet. Thank you for watching.